Last night, Donald Trump decided to remove the legal status of 530,000 legal immigrants to the United States. Trump has eliminated a Biden-era program that allowed for hundreds of thousands of Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans to come to the United States in response to humanitarian disasters that were occurring in those countries. The program was known as CHNV for the initials of all the countries that it contained. The Trump administration's order states that parolees without a lawful basis to remain in the United States following this termination of the CHNV parole programs must depart the United States before their parole termination date. The notice immediately revokes their work authorization. Keep in mind, all of these people had to have a sponsor to enter the country, meaning an organization or a company saying that they would financially be there responsible for that person. And not only that, they had to keep working the entire time. So these are all working people, paying taxes, living in the United States. Many of them, in the 2 years this program has existed, have moved their lives to come to the United States, to do the thing, to achieve the American dream in a legal way. And Donald Trump has eliminated that legal status. And one of the justifications they give for removing this is that it's overtaxing Florida airports, that the programs do not serve a significant public benefit and are not necessary to reduce the levels of illegal immigration, did not significantly mitigate the domestic effect of illegal immigration, and are not serving their intended purposes, and are inconsistent with the administration's foreign policy goals. And if you need to be reminded what the foreign policy goals for the Trump administration, it's paying El Salvador to put Americans and other deportees into their prison complex system for profit. The removal of their legal status now opens them up to expedited removal, as in the same removal process that we are seeing across the United States, where there is no due process, you do not see a judge, and you end up detained indefinitely until the United States maybe deports you, or maybe back to your own country, but potentially now to a prison in El Salvador. Trump has already removed Haitians and Venezuelans from the temporary protected status group, which means that they have one less option to do to achieve a legal status after this one is removed. The situation is slightly different for Cubans, who in 1966 there was a law passed called the Cuban Adjustment Act, which allows for Cubans who have been in the United States for 1 year and 1 day to apply for legal status. But the Homeland Security Department has decided to pause all applications coming from immigrants, meaning that if the process is not completed, they are still eligible to be deported in the same way into these for-profit ICE facilities. But most affected will be Nicaraguans who have no other legal mechanism for legal status in the United States. And while this will all be challenged in the courts, during the meantime, when a decision is not made, people's lives will be taken. They will be disappeared in the streets or out of their homes and placed in ICE facilities. And this will continue going. Whether or not the Trump administration decides to listen to the court is an entirely different problem. But Donald Trump continues to defy court order after court order, and has even called for the impeachment of judges who are ruling against him, and has specifically passed another executive order asking his Homeland Security Department and the Justice Department to go after lawyers that sue the government for illegal actions that the Trump administration is doing. The rule of law in the US is effectively dead because Congress is no longer enforcing their part because it's controlled by the president's party, and Donald Trump is not willing to listen to any injunction from the court at all. And a similar fear is happening with Ukrainian refugees who are also on the border of Donald Trump deciding that they all must immediately leave. And this is again hundreds of thousands of more people. And while you might have heard of Donald Trump stopping to use Guantanamo Bay to house deportees, it has once again restarted this just days ago. And it's not just removing the status of existing refugees, asylum seekers, legal residents of the United States, and people who legally immigrated. He is also making it more difficult for new refugees by cutting their aid to 1/3, decreasing the amount of time they can get it by 12 months to 4 months, and making every aspect of this giving less and less. He is trying to punish people for their status as refugees. But remember, just a few months ago, people were laughing at Donald Trump saying they're eating the cats and eating the dogs, and now Haitian immigrants are being pulled out of their homes and deported into for-profit prisons. At this point, you must be asking, what the heck is a private prison? Well, Ronald Reagan, through his privatization schemes, thought it would be a brilliant, thriving industry to set up private prisons in the United States. And they have been a thriving business since, until a few years ago when Joe Biden decided to ban them for use in federal prisons, which means they took a real big kick. But then they also were very, very clever, realizing, well, what other groups of people do people like to lock up and they don't care about? Oh yeah, migrants. And while there are a lot of companies in the private prison industry, two take up almost the entire industry in the United States: Geo Group and CoreCivic. And see, the way they make money is by having a certain amount of bodies in their private prisons. And if you're trying to shove a lot of people to maximize that amount, you end up with a lot of people dying. CoreCivic and Geo Group make their most money out of what is called a per diem, so a per day payment on how many people you have in the prison every single day. This is around between $60 and $100 per day per prisoner. And you can see that this becomes a bit of a problem because you need to have more people to make more money. And the idea for migrant detention facilities is all over now. You've heard the Rwanda plan in the UK. Even yesterday it was announced Keir Starmer was looking at sending people to the Western Balkans to use migrant detention facilities. There is big money in private detention facilities, and that is why you see them popping up everywhere. And the idea of using people arrested without due process to be sent across to another country like El Salvador to their CCOT facility, a supermax prison used to literally contain terrorists, for people who are literally just regular folks whose immigration status was revoked by Donald Trump on a whim, yeah, you can see how that's a bit of a problem. A prison where people are held 80 to 100 to a single room. Do not have showers to bathe in, they merely have bowls to wash, where the lights are never turned off, and a guard is always staring at you from above and in front of you all day, all night, forever. Built out of view so it doesn't make anyone unhappy and no one can know what really happens inside. And the Department of Homeland Security has already announced that it is at maximum capacity for detainees. So they're building more facilities all over the country, more and more camps for ICE. Trump's border czar wants 100,000 more beds. And he has called for the Department of Defense to assist him in speeding up deportations, meaning the military. And Homan is of the opinion that any person could possibly from a country that sponsors terrorism. And some states like Texas are offering up over 1,000 acres of land to put up more camps. And Trump continues to justify this by saying America is being invaded by foreigners and simultaneously destroying agencies that oversee and make sure that there is not abuse in the system of people, literally removing the offices that protect people's civil rights. And we've seen facilities like this before for deportees in another land in a foreign country where the rules no longer apply, where the rule of law no longer exists.